How's it? Welcome back to the garage. So some time ago, I bought a DIY misting kit to install on my deck. I bought this from one of our local retailers online that normally only sells things for a single day at a time. And when it arrived, I tested it. And quite frankly, it was rubbish. The problem is, that is actually a watering kit. Even the pictures on the back show pictures of pots getting watered. It's not a fine mist. It's like pretty much what comes out of a sprinkler. So if you have that on for 5 minutes, everything around it is completely soaking wet. It's not really a mist that just cools down the air and evaporates and keeps you cool. It just makes you wet. So I was thinking about a couple of ideas of how to still make this work for me. And the one thought I had is that I would only like to switch it on for a little bit at a time. So sort of pulse it on for a few seconds and then stop. And then it would just put a little pulse of water into the air. And I figured that would work pretty well. I was thinking of how to do this. I thought, you get the sprinkler controllers, automatic sprinkler controllers. You could set something up like that. But the valves that go with the sprinkler controller are actually quite expensive. You pay sort of anything between 250 or 500, 600, 700 rand just for the solenoid valve. And that was not really what I wanted to spend to try and achieve this problem or try and achieve this solution. So I looked elsewhere, and eventually on one of the local electronic sites, I managed to find these. So these are a 220 volt solenoid valve that's normally closed, which means that you energize it to open, and the rest of the time it's closed. And it's kind of offset, so you can mount the electrical part into a separate box and have your wet part out of that, so it's safe. And I thought I can use this somehow. And then I started to think about timers. I started to think about having some sort of a relay logic system. And then I resorted back to my old friend, Sonoff. So I did some experiments with some Sonoffs that I had lying around, and they have a few functions that you can use that allow you to switch on something regularly, but only for a short amount of time. So it's called the inching function. That means that I can, every time I activate that Sonoff, it'll only switch on for a second or 2 seconds or 5 seconds, and then automatically switch off again. And you can set this as a routine to do it every 10 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour. Now, I don't know what that timing looks like yet because I'm going to have to test it. But I thought this would be a good option to try and build a little controller using a solenoid valve and a Sonoff with the inching function to solve my problem. Now, it's obviously winter at the moment, and I don't really need a misting kit on my deck in winter. But the second thing I also was trying to achieve is to water some of the plants that I installed on my deck on the other side. When I built it, I put in the piping for some sort of a watering system, but I never really had a watering system that I could install at the time, and I didn't want to buy some sort of expensive irrigation system to basically water a pot. And when I thought about this idea for the misters, I figured, well, I could just double it up, and then I could also have a separate control for the sprinklers on the other side. And now, being winter up here in Johannesburg, it's very dry, and we need to water our plants quite regularly in winter. So I thought I'd build this now, and I can at least use the sprinkler side of the circuit, or the sprinkler valve, in the meantime, to water my plants. But I will be able to test my misting system. Even if I don't install the misting system now, I'll still be able to make sure that the theory works around it. And that's why I'm going to do it now and not in summer. So let me show you what I've got to get this thing going. So these are the basic components I have for this project. I've got a Sonoff, I've got a dual channel. Now initially I was going to put 2 single channel Sonoffs into the box, but I figured this might be a bit more compact. I'm not sure that's true because it's quite a lot bigger than I expected, but at least this way I can save the 2 single channels that I already have for some other sort of project. This still gives me independent control over both the outputs. Then I've got a box. Everything is going to be mounted in this box. It's probably going to be a bit tight, but the reason I chose to use this box is because I had it. And the other reason is it's got a gasket on the inside, which means that I can seal it up nicely for installation outside. So that's the box I'm going to try and use. It's going to be tight, but that's okay. Then I've just got a gland and a power cable. I found this power cable, obviously I've cut it off something before. It's got a plug on already, so I'm going to make use of that. And then I've got solenoids. So these are plastic. I bought them from a company called Mantech. They were quite cheap, I think 120 or 130 rand each. So it's a 220 volt coil, and then it's got an inlet and an outlet. There's actually an arrow on the bottom here that shows you the direction of flow, and that's important because if you connect flow the wrong way, you probably find this won't seal properly. It's been designed for flow in a single direction, so this is going to be basically your pressurized side, and this will be your outlet side. What's cool about these is they've got a little lip here, which means that I can cut a hole in this box big enough to slide this section in, and then I can seal it up. I can put some sealants around this lip and I can seal it. So the box will remain sealed, the electrical will remain in the box, and then only the water connections are on the outside. So I've got two of those, one for the misters, one for the sprinklers. So what I'm thinking is to mount these solenoids on the bottom of the box and on the top of the box, something like that. So I will mount it in here, I'll cut a hole, and that'll give me my inlet connections on this side. So I can share an inlet connection, I can come out here with some sort of an elbow, and I can go up to a point where I'm going to connect my water supply in. Now that is going to be a separate project to do all the water supply connection. I've got a point I'm going to tie into the existing pipe work, and I've got a few bits and pieces, but I will not include that in this video today. And then on the outlet side, I'm going to need somehow to reduce from this thread, which I think is a 3/4 inch, or yeah, I think it's a 3/4 inch thread, down to a little 8mm pipe, which is the pipe I'm using for my irrigation, which is kind of like one of those drip pipes, or the pipe that connects from your main header up to your sprinkler. And that is the same pipe that is on the mister system. So I am going to have to find a way to reduce this down to that connection. Not 100% sure how I'm going to do it. I went to the shops and I couldn't really find what I was looking for, so I bought a few bits and pieces that I'm sure we're going to be able to use to put this together. So to start off, what I want to actually do is mark out the areas on this box that I want to cut out. I'm going to measure this, I'm going to mark it out here, and I'm going to cut that out with a Dremel. So I want to just measure the top of this and just see what we're working with. So it's going to be about 45mm. That is going to be the hole that we're going to have to cut here. In fact, I think 45 might be a little bit, yeah, 45 mils should be fine, because the bottom flange, if you can call it that, is about 48 mils. So it's going to be pretty tight. So I think we'll aim for slightly under 45. This is actually more like 44. So I'm going to mark it as 43. We can cut it out and then we can expand it if required. So 43 mils square. Let's just confirm that this is in fact a square. Yes, it is. So that's what I'm going to try and cut out from this. I just want to position it as close to the edge here as possible, but I want to kind of avoid this curved corner here that's curved to make allowance for the screw holes. So that's going to be my outside edge, I think. And then I just want to find the center of that so we can center this nicely. So that distance is from there it's going to be 60. So 30 in. Here's the center. I think I'll just mark it as a center over here just to make it easy. And then we just want to measure 43mm along. So we'll start here, 10, 43 that way. It's not the easiest thing to get a square off, but that looks pretty good. Let's just check. Yeah, that looks good. And then I just need to measure 43 in this dimension. So now I just need to measure 43 here. So I'm going to divide that by 2. So 43 divided by 2 is 21.5. 21.5 mils is a pretty tight measurement. Okay. And then I'll do the same on this side. Okay. that's what we want to remove. Now I'm just going to do the same on the other side, and then we can cut it out. Okay, so both holes are marked out. Now I'm going to get the Dremel and I'm going to try and cut this out quite neatly, more neatly than my last Dremel project. That went pretty smoothly. So now it's just a test fit here. I feel like I might have messed up my measurement. Okay, so now that I measured again, and I didn't follow the rule of measure twice, cut once, it's actually only 39 wide, not 44. So this is going to be a bit wider than it needs to be, but we can just solve that problem with silicone. So I'm just going to trim it out a bit here. It's a little bit tight. Okay, that's not a bad fit. I'm going to adjust my measurement on the other side just so I don't get this overcut, because I didn't measure twice and cut once. So, but on this, I'll make sure this is the bottom, and then I will just fill that gap with silicone to keep this block nicely sealed. This side is definitely a much better fit. That's a nice tight fit. So this will definitely be the top. In fact, I'm even going to write that on here right now. Top. So I'm just going to quickly do a test fit here. I've got my two solenoids that will come in like this, and I need somewhere for my electrical cable to come in. So if I'm looking at this box, I think what I probably want to do is have the solenoid somewhere over here, so it's out the way. I did check the sizing, and I think I'm going to have to, I will have to remove it from its casing and just use the board. So I'm going to put that on this side somewhere, maybe on this side. Let's see. So this board will probably fit better on this side, I think. It's a bit more out of the way. Yeah, and then I've got some space to make these connections. So I think my power must come in the back side here. So what I'm going to do is right towards the back, I'm just going to drill a quick hole there that I can use for my power cable. So I think all the messy bits are done. Now I'm just going to do a quick cleanup, and then we can carry on. Everything's now nice and clean, so I'm going to start basically with what is essentially a dry assembly of this project. I'm not going to glue these into place just yet. I want to get all the wiring done. I want to get them into final position, and then I will silicone them in, because once they're siliconed in, they're going to be quite a challenge to get out. And one thing we do need to consider is the connections, particularly on this side, that we install those so that we can actually glue this in place. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to screw anything onto this thread. So we just need to keep that in mind. That is going to be the basic look and feel of this. And this guy is going to go in here. The power coming in this side. What I want to do is I want to pre-wire all these outputs to these solenoids. I want to do all the wiring, leave a bit of slack, and then I think I'm just going to hot glue this into place over here. If you were not enclosing this inside a box like I am, I definitely wouldn't recommend removing this from its casing. If I look at the circuitry, well, obviously it's very easy to come into contact with a live part of this. Now you don't want to get shocked. It's quite dangerous, but because this is going to be in a completely sealed container, I'm okay with stripping this out of its enclosure, because it's not going to be a problem. Then when I set it up, I'll set it up very carefully. I will get it connected to the Wi-Fi, and then once that's done, I can close up this container and I don't have to worry about it again. One thing I have considered is wiring a manual button or 2 manual override buttons onto this. It's something I might do in the future, but at this stage I don't actually have any buttons like that lying around, but maybe it's something I'll add at a later stage. What I'm using for the internal wiring here is I'm just going to use this twin flex that I've got. I only need short little bits of it. It's not going to carry a lot of current. It's not going to be a problem in terms of that. So I'm just going to quickly make up some connection leads for the 2 solenoids. And then I just want to put some lugs on to these cables to easily connect to the solenoids. I could solder it directly onto those tabs, but if I've got lugs, it's a lot easier to use these instead. Cool, those are ready, and now I'm just going to connect them to the Sonoff. So this is pretty straightforward. These are actually just what they're called spring clamp connections. So you push down this white thing, you push your wire in and you release it, and then it grabs it in there so it doesn't come out. So if I look here, it's easy to connect. It's got a live input and 3 neutrals, and then a line out 1 and a line out 2. So those are going to be our 2 outputs. So I'm just going to connect the first one here to output 1, and I'm going to make output 1 the bottom. We will mark it on here. Not that it really matters, we can always change it in the software. It's not really a big deal, but I'm just pushing these guys down, pushing the connection in and releasing, and that is nice and tight. And output 2 will be the top one. Okay, so I've connected the 2 output lines, and then this is our incoming line, live and neutral, and we'll connect that just now. So if this is going to fit in like here, I've got plenty of space to go up to my solenoid top and bottom. So I'm just going to set that aside for a moment, and I just want to prepare our supply cable. I've mentioned this before. Whenever you're installing something like this, make sure that you don't forget to install all the grommets and seals on the cable before you close it up. Otherwise, it's a very good chance you forget. So for this, I do need it to be quite long inside there. I think I will strip off to about here, and that should give me sufficient slack inside to maneuver the wires around where I need them. Okay, there's a good connection, and now I'm just going to strip off these ends so we can connect it to the Sonoff. What I will do is when I'm securing the solenoids in place here, I am going to do a little bead of silicone around the inside here, just to make sure that this thing stays nice and sealed, considering it is quite nearby some water. And that's all the electrical connections we need to make. It's pretty easy. So let me slide this in here for now. Let's just fit in our solenoids again. Great. So that's actually looking pretty good. Now we need to start thinking about the water connections that we're going to put onto the ends of these solenoids. So I've got a couple of bits and pieces that I had. So what I've got is I've got some of these quick connect fittings. And what I was thinking is I could put a coupling on here, and I could come out to 2 quick connect fittings. And then I can join these together with a T-piece, a little bit of piping, and then I can go to wherever more water is going to come from. This side is more of a trick. This is the connection that came with the Mr. system, and it's got this little thin tubing pipe, but it's also got this connection. Now I wanted to ideally use 2 of these with some sort of a coupler, but I couldn't really find what I was looking for. Bit difficult to come across, because I couldn't find this part again. So I've ended up going another route. I've got some irrigation fittings that fit on here. So what I'm going to do is I've got another socket I can put on this side, and then I will just put a connection. This is a hose connection, or a irrigation piping connection. So this goes from a 1/2 inch, which this is a 1/2 inch. I think I said 3/4 inch earlier. It's actually a 1/2 inch, to a 15 mil irrigation pipe. And then on the 15 mil irrigation pipe side, you actually get a fitting that you can push in and make a connection to the pipe. So that, I think, is going to have to be what I'm going to use on this end, because I could not get reducers that go directly from 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch or anything down to that push-on fitting, because those thin pipes are actually designed to come off a main header, and the main header is normally like a 20 or a 25 or a 15 millimeter black irrigation pipe. So I'm going to make basically two short headers, one for the sprinklers to go up and one to come down to the irrigation for the plants. So these are the sockets I have. They're galvanized sockets. This is what is available at the shop, and it'll work. It'll be fine. I just need to put some thread tape on here, tighten this on. I'm only going to hand tighten it because this is plastic or it's nylon, and it definitely will break or crack if you tighten it too tightly. It's a good fit. I just now need to put some thread tape and then make these galvanized fittings onto both ends of these solenoids. So I'm going to do that now. So the one tip with thread tape is that you always want to put the tape in the same direction as you're going to screw your fitting onto. And the reason is that if you screw it in the opposite direction, it can often push the thread tape back and it can sort of bunch up. Now, with galvanized fittings, normally you would want to use Hessian or something like that. I don't have, well, I do have Hessian, but I'm just a bit concerned about the seal I'm going to get with the galvanized fitting onto the plastic with Hessian. I'm worried it's not going to give me a good seal. Now, if it is galvanized to galvanized, then I would definitely use that. But in this case, I'm going to actually use thread tape. There is the risk that the galvanized fitting will cut the thread tape, but because we've got this nylon on this side, it should hopefully bunch up in there and give us a good seal. Now you only really want to do this once, so you want to make sure you've got enough tape on there the first time round so that you don't have a bad fitting or a bad connection. So I put on a good amount of tape. I'm going to screw this on nice and tight. But if I'm honest, it immediately feels like it's not quite enough. It went on way too easily. If I give it a blow test here, it doesn't seem to push anything through, so maybe we're okay. Ideally what we want to do is actually put water onto the end here, so that I'm going to try and do that just now to see that I've at least got a good connection on this side, because this is the supply end, and you want your supply end to have a really good connection. On your delivery end, if you've got a slight leak there, that's not a big deal because it's only going to be on for a short amount of time. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. This side, where it's always going to be switched on, you don't want any sort of leak. Okay, that's the first one done. Now we do the second one. So now we've got the fittings on that are going to show us now exactly where these things can mount, and to be honest, it is actually quite far out of the box. So we're going to have to get a really good seal of silicone in there, get everything into place, hold it nicely in place, and then we can silicone it in and leave it to dry probably for a couple of hours while everything sets nicely. Because we now have access to both ends of these fittings, so we don't necessarily need to worry about that anymore. But before I silicone it into place, I just want to connect up the solenoids and set up the Sonoff and make sure that they are actually operational. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to make the bottom one output 1. I'm going to write it at the bottom here. And this is going to be for the sprinklers. And I want to make the top one output 2. And that's going to be for the sprayers. The reason I'm doing that is I know that my water line across the deck to the sprinklers goes down underneath the deck, and I know that my line that I'm going to want to use for the sprayers is going to go up, so I want it to come out the top. Great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plug it in, and I'm going to pair this to my smartphone. So I've wired everything up, I've powered on the Sonoff, and I've connected it to my EV-Link app. And this is what I've got. I've called it Back Garden Water, and then it shows me channel 1 and channel 2. So I can individually control the channels. So channel 1, and you can see what I've activated there is the inching function. So that means it switches on for 1 second and then switches off again automatically. And then channel 2, and as you can see, that one stays on until I switch it off. So now that I know the solenoids are working, I am going to start with the assembly of this box. So what my primary concern at this stage is to get the solenoids secured into place with a good helping of silicone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some silicone, close up all those gaps, clamp it all into place, and then I'm going to leave that to dry for a while. So after quite a bit of hassle, I've kind of managed to get the whole thing clamped into place, although I think I messed most of the silicone off in the process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it clamped like this. The bits that I can get to, I'm going to put a lot more silicone around the edges, and once it's dry, I'll silicone the sides that I couldn't get to now. At least then it will be held in place. It's been a couple of days now, and what I've done is I've actually secured the solenoids into the box with a lot of silicone on the inside and on the outside, and I'm pretty sure I've got a pretty good watertight seal. And then what you can see on the outside is basically my inlets and my outlet manifolds. So I've got a push-in connector for 15mm white PEX pipe. That's this sort of piping. It's a plumbing pipe. It bends quite easily. It's quite easy to work with. And then you just use one of these push-in connectors here. You push it in so it's got a hard seal, and then you push it into whatever your connector is, and it makes a really good and simple seal. And it's a lot easier than working with hard copper or something like that. So I've got the pushing connector here for the PEX, then I've got an isolation valve, so I can isolate either the sprinklers or I can isolate the sprayers if I would want to. Maybe in winter I just want to switch the sprayers off, so there's actually no pressure on this valve and there's no chance of developing a leak or some sort of contaminant buildup or anything like that. So I've got the valve, then I've got the socket that I've put on already to connect onto the valve, the solenoid valve, and then I've got a socket on the outlet. Then I've got a screw-in hose connector here. So this is a push-on hose connector, and I've got the small piece of black garden hose, and then I've got a stopper in the end. So this is going to be like my outlet manifold. And I'm going to connect my piping to that is I'm going to use this tool. You just basically make a hole in it, and you push in one of these barb connectors. So these barb connectors go into the pipe, and then they can't pull out because of this little blip on the barb here, and then you can connect your flexible pipe or your little thin piping onto this end, and then that makes your connection. So I'm pretty happy with that, but I'm actually only going to make that decide where I'm going to put that connection once I've installed this outside and I've got everything finalized, and then I can decide if I want it to come off the side, at the top, or the bottom, or whatever it is, according to where it's got to go when it's in its final position. So I'll do that later on. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you the functionality of this now, and then I'm going to wrap this video up, and I'm going to save the installation for another video. So let's open up the app. Now I've already added the Sonoff switch here to my Ulink app, and I've called it Back Garden Water, and then I can see the channel 1 and channel 2. So channel 1 is going to be for the sprayers, so that means that if I switch it on, it'll automatically switch off after 1 second. Let's just confirm that setting. So what we're using here is something called inching. Now inching is very useful for something like this, where you want to switch on something and then immediately switch it off. And it's also very useful if you're going to control something like a garage door maybe. Now you can use one of these Sonoff switches, just the regular one, and then you can use the contact inside it with some minor modification to the actual switch, and you can use it to just close a contact that will control your garage door or your gate or whatever. But like with the remote press, you just want to switch it on and off, so you don't want to hold it on and you don't want to have to switch it on and off manually. So what you do then is you go and set an inching duration of a second or half a second, so that every time you switch it on, it automatically switches off after a half second or a 1 second. And I've done that with my garage door, and I'm going to use the same functionality here for the sprayers. So we're going to say we just want the sprayers to come on for just 1 second every however long, and then automatically switch off again. So that's what I'm going to do. So for channel 1, I've set the inching duration to 1 second, and there's no inching on number 2, because number 2 is going to be watering the garden. So we can go back now to our home screen here. So channel 1. Now in the background I'll show you something now how we're going to control this. But basically if it switches on, it switches off automatically after 1 second. Now for channel 2 we actually want to use a schedule. So when it switches on, it'll switch on at a certain time every day, and it will switch off at a certain time every day. So what I've done is I've gone and set up a schedule over here. And I've said, okay, at 2 o'clock every day, because you can select when you would like it to repeat. I've selected all the days. You can select Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, or Sundays and Tuesdays, or whatever you want. And it'll switch it on every single day at 2 o'clock, and at 2:05 every single day, it'll switch the sprinklers off. Now you could also use this as an inching function. You could set the inching time as long as you want it to be watered for. And this could also be useful as a fail-safe, because it doesn't matter if maybe the app fails and it doesn't switch it off, it won't leave something running. It will automatically switch off after that fixed duration. Because my understanding is that inching duration is actually a parameter that sits on the device itself and not in the cloud with the app. So for the sprinklers, this is pretty straightforward. 2 o'clock every day it switches on, 2:05 every day it'll switch off. Now for the sprayers, it was a bit more complicated. Now I thought I'd found a function within this app that will allow me to do a repetitive function every fixed amount of time. So I thought I could set it when I switch it on, so every 15 minutes it'll perform a function. But I don't know if maybe that function used to be available and it's not, but I can't seem to find it at the moment. So what I've done is I've used IFTTT. So in IFTTT, you can set up actions that will take place based on whatever parameters you want to put in that are supported by IFTTT. So IFTTT stands for if this, then that. So what I've set is that if every hour at 15 minutes past the hour, I must turn on channel 1 of the back garden water, which is the sprayers. So I could set up a bunch of these things to say, okay, maybe every 15 minutes I want to switch the sprayers on, but it'll only work when I've got this connected slider switched on. If I don't want them to run, I can just switch it off, and if I want them to run, I just switch it on. So that way, in this case, every hour, 15 minutes past the hour, it's going to switch the back garden sprinklers on, and then the inching function is going to automatically switch them off after 1 second. So I think I'm going to leave this video here for today. There's quite a lot still to cover with installation and the bits and pieces there. So I think this is a useful little device as is, that can be used for a variety of things. I might modify it to use it for something else. I might change it up at some stage. I'm not really sure at this stage. However, I think that once we get this installed, it'll be a good opportunity to test how well it works, how well the solenoids work, how reliable the functions on the Sonoff are, and I will definitely report back to you guys on what that sort of stuff looks like. So if you like this video or found it interesting or helpful or have anything to say, put it in the comments below, and also consider giving the video a like. If you enjoy what I'm doing here, subscribe to the channel. I would like to continue making content like this with Sonoffs and home automation, cooking, basic DIY around the house, the things that I find interesting and keep me busy. And lastly, until next time, stay safe. How's it? Chris from the future here. So just a quick update. It's really been bugging me that I haven't been able to repeat a task over and over again using the Sonoff, because I was certain that there was a functionality that allowed me to do that, because that's why I planned the project this way. So I did a bit of research and I looked back a bit and I found something called a loop function. Now that loop function is available on the Sonoff Basics that I have, but it actually is not available on the Sonoff Dual. Now I didn't know that at first. I didn't really research the functionality. I just assumed that it would be the same as the rest of the devices. But without that loop function, you can't do a task on like a repeated timer. So with the loop function, I can say every 30 minutes, switch on the outdoor sprayers. They will switch on, and then the inching function will switch them off after a second or 2 seconds or whatever. And that's really the functionality I need for those sprayers. So I've decided to change out the Sonoff Dual for 2 Sonoff Basics. Then I'll have a Sonoff for each of the 2 solenoids to control, and it will give me more of what I'm trying to achieve here. And then I'm just going to use that Dual for some other projects in the future.